Tech revision with Mrs. Swanee Pooh. Hi Year 11, this video is going to cover two key things, very useful material revision, and the two things it's going to cover are composites and thermosetting plastics. So firstly, we're going to have a look at thermosetting plastics in a bit more detail. So what do you need to know? The first thing that you need to have an awareness of is that there are two types of kind of categories of plastics. You have thermosetting and you have thermoforming, sometimes called just thermoplastics, okay? And there are some big differences between the two. Now, as you can see in the text above here, thermosetting plastics, they undergo a chemical change when they are heated. So when they are heated up to mold them into a product, basically bonds form between the polymer chains, and that is a permanent chemical change, meaning they're hard, they're rigid, and they cannot be melted and reshaped again. That's really important to know. So with thermoforming plastics, like PET and polypropylene and plastics like that, you can heat them, injection mold them, you could heat them up again and reshape them, and that makes them useful because you can recycle them. But with thermosetting plastics, you cannot do that. They are non-recyclable, meaning they can't be melted and reshaped again. So obviously that's not good news for planet Earth. Yes, that is planet Earth. Nope, not good. But because they can't be melted and reshaped, it does make them quite useful in certain applications. So we're going to have a look at the ones that you need to know. Those are these ones here. And we're going to have a look at these in just a little bit more detail. You don't need to know loads and loads about these thermosetting plastics. I would recommend that if I said one of these names to you, you could name one use and you could name maybe one property that makes it suitable for that use. Okay, so let's go through each one. So I'm hoping that you know this one, epoxy resin. You may have used it before in the workshop to join materials together. It's quite often used as an adhesive. You may have watched things like people making these kind of like river tables. Sometimes it's used for casting of kind of decorative objects. And it's also a very good electrical insulator, making it quite useful for things like circuit boards. So the green stuff here is epoxy resin. Now the properties that make it useful: it is very rigid. Once the two parts have been mixed together, it is super rigid. It's very durable. Obviously that's good for a resin. You don't want it for an adhesive. You don't want it to be breaking down and losing its strength. And it's a very good electrical insulator. So like I said, it's used for adhesives, circuit boards and decorative items, but the most obvious one for me is adhesives. We use those in the workshop, and you may have used epoxy resin on something like your desk tidy or other projects that you've made. Right, the next one you need to know, urea formaldehyde. What a funny name. Top tip for you: if it's got a funny name like formaldehyde or resin, that normally means it is a thermosetting plastic. So that's quite a good way of identifying them. If it's got some really odd name like this, like a chemically sounding name, and it doesn't start with poly or have resin in it, then it normally means that it's either a thermoforming or a thermosetting. So thermosetting usually have strange kind of names like formaldehyde, resin, all that sort of stuff. So the main kind of use for this, there are lots of different uses, but the main one I want you to remember is that it's quite often used for plug sockets. So this is where the benefit of it being a thermosetting plastic comes into light, because you do not want, if there was any kind of heat being generated from here, you do not want your electrical socket to be dripping and melting off the wall. So even if it does get hot, it won't lose its shape. So we've got some properties here. It's hard, it can be brittle, it's an excellent electrical insulator, and its main use, plug sockets. Urea formaldehyde. Another formaldehyde here is melamine, which someone said to me once sounded like a posh girl that goes to Cheltenham College. Melamine! But melamine formaldehyde The main kind of use for this is work surfaces. So it could be a desk at school. So all of the surfaces at school, the ones that you work on, unless they are proper wood, which is quite unlikely, unless it's our nice new workshop, which doesn't actually have real wood, will be made of this stuff, a melamine formaldehyde, like a thermosetting plastic over the top of the surface to protect it. Because what properties does it have? It is strong, but here's the big one, it's scratch resistant, makes it really good for a hard wearing surface, which is going to get a lot of punishment. And also it's heat resistant. So useful for these two applications, kitchen work surfaces, so like these ones here, which may have like a knife chopping into it, or it might have a hot pan going down onto the surface, and you don't want that melting into the surface of your kitchen worktop. So melamine formaldehyde is a coating applied to the top of usually like a chipboard or a plywood, and it produces a really hard wearing surface. Right, next couple. This one's an odd one. Phenol or phenyl formaldehyde is super hard, heat resistant. The main use I could find is snooker balls. If any of you have heard of something called Bakelite, that is actually this stuff, and that was the first commercially available plastic back in the day. So that kind of like old brown plastic that was used for like old-fashioned phones. Why am I drawing headphones? But you know what I mean, the ones that have got like the numbers on the front. You get the idea. That's an awful picture. But main use, snooker balls, and it's super hard, obviously making it quite useful for that application. The last one of the thermosetting plastics is polyester resin. This stuff is a little bit different because it's not often used by itself. This one is often used as the kind of adhesive in the glass fibre kind of process. So where sheets of glass fibre is kind of laid into like a frame like this, and then you have adhesive in between, and that adhesive is polyester resin. So you've got resin in the name there, which gives it away that it's a thermosetting plastic. It's cheap, it's hard, and it sets very stiff, and it's used in glass fibre, creation of glass fibre, basically fiberglass, which I'm sure lots of you have heard of. And it's used for things like kayaks and boat hulls. And on the next video I'm going to talk about composites, and this one comes up in that one as well. So I know I said I was going to talk about composites as well, but I'm going to put that in a separate video. So hopefully that takes you through the different types of thermosetting plastics. See you on the next video.